the second in command, gets a second wave release. Here's a look at the new Super 7 G.I. Joe Ultimates Flint Warrant Officer. Book smart and leather tough, Flint is exactly the kind of leader G.I. Joe wants to guide troops into battle against the fearsome forces of Cobra. This made-to-order 7-inch scale, fully articulated G.I. Joe Ultimates figure of Flint comes with interchangeable heads and hands, as well as 10 additional weapons and accessories. They say that knowing is half the battle, but you already know you want the Flint figure, so there's no need to battle against your urge to add this one to your collection. First, before we look at Flint, who happens to also be, by the way, my favorite G.I. Joe of all time. Not only my favorite character in the cartoon, I know other people like Duke, but I always thought that Flint was a cooler character. And while the fandom was certainly there for Scarlet, I always thought that Lady J was, well, Lady J. But also one of my favorite G.I. Joe toys as a kid growing up. I actually ended up having 2 Flints because the first Flint that I had, I lost at a park, and I was very visibly upset that my parents went out and still luckily there was Flints on the shelf that I got a second Flint. So actually when I was a kid, I had 2 Flints, and eventually I got myself Tiger Force Flint, but he wasn't as cool as Black Clad Flint. Anyways, you can tell right away, I'm really excited for this figure. And we're going to get down to, of course, looking at all the accessories also in a moment. I did also want to grab the tape measure, show you guys how tall the figure stands. We'll also do some comparisons also in a second. Flint, like the others, is about the same height. He's going to be about almost 7 inches of that. Or the figure, I would say, is about 17 centimeters tall. Being, of course, also that Flint is part of Wave 2, let's bring in the Wave 1 Joes at least for comparisons. Here's what he looks like with the already mentioned Duke. Here's also what he looks like with blue-clad Snake Eyes. And of course, you can't have Snake Eyes without Timber. Here's what the figures, at least from a Joe standpoint, what we have so far between Wave 1 and Wave 2. Once again, Super 7 has outdone themselves with the included accessories with these Ultimate Joe figures, some of which you may be able to see, the ones here in the front, some of which you may not be able to see, but you'll see in a second. Some of them are also episode-specific accessories, and some of them are actually just weapons that he wields in the cartoon as well. If, though, you prefer to have your G.I. Joe Flint looking like he did from the original 80s toy release, then the figure comes included, first of all, with a backpack. Now, the original backpack would have been all kind of more of a swamp-colored green. None of the buckles, for example, would have been painted silver. The little water canteen he would have had would have also not been painted. I think maybe like the grenades also that would have been also sculpted in all the dark green. This one, while it doesn't actually open up and none of the accessories are removable, at least it does actually have straps on the back instead of the old days of having a peg on the back that you'd have to plug it onto the back of the Joe's torso. This can fit onto Flint. I was going to say Duke. You can fit this on Flint's body by just bringing his arms back, of course, and then you're just going to take them and stretch them up the sides of his arms till eventually they are attached onto the back of the figure's body. And I'm glad to see that they include things like this, like the backpacks, without having to put an obnoxious hole on the back of the figure's torso. While still sticking with the original 80s toy, the figure also comes included with this shotgun. The shotgun, like the backpack, would have been all kind of more of a dark green, where actually this time around, this shotgun gets treated some nice dark gray, almost borderlining black, and some additional medium gray is added in there as well. So if you did want to have more of the classic look to Flint, he has these options available. If, though, you prefer to have your figure looking like he did from the cartoon, maybe first what we'll do is we'll just take the backpack off, because I know it's only going to get in the way anyways when we look at the figure's articulation. So let's just take that off and put that to the side. Moving then on to the other things. Figure, first of all, comes included, I should say second of all, the figure comes included with a newspaper article. It isn't so much an article, that's a full stack newspaper. I don't know what that's causing from a monthly subscription standpoint, but I'm pretty sure the Joes are probably paying top dollar to get a newspaper this thick. This one actually, in fact, says Cobra Commander to deliver State of the Empire address tonight. Really like the look of this. One thing I also really like is the fact that Super 7 chose not to put this on paper. I mean, yeah, it is supposed to be a paper, but when you have companies that do print this on paper, like maps, pictures, anything else that's normally paper in real life, doesn't always translate well to a paper accessory because that's always the thing that ends up getting crumpled. This is a good stack of plastic, and it's also printed on both sides too. So there's longevity to this that I know it's not going to get damaged over time. The figure also comes included with a walkie-talkie. And it seems to be the same walkie-talkie that we got with both Duke and Snake Eyes. This one also has the 302 on the front. Very small, though, something is very susceptible being lost. The figure also comes included with a little portable lantern. I like the coloring of this one. Kind of more of a lighter green with a little banding of green around the sections of where the light comes out. Nice little small accessory. The figure also comes included with binoculars. These binoculars are a little bit more different than the original 80s binoculars that would have come with the Joes that would have had a long strap. Duke, in fact, came included with that accessory, but Flint, being the fact that his original figure didn't have that, there was no need to include that accessory. So if you wanted the more vintage-looking binoculars, I guess you probably could use the one that came included with Duke. In the meantime, though, you get yourself some binoculars. That's always good to see. You get yourself also a shovel. I was trying to place whereabouts I've seen the shovel in the cartoon. I'm sure there's been times where somebody's been wielding a shovel, but there's got to be an episode-specific reference as to why he comes included with a shovel. Still, though, he has one, so it's nice to see. Some nice silver's been afforded to the head of the shovel, while more of a matte gray gets given to the handle. The figure also comes included with the traditional G.I. Joe standout. I mean, obviously the little laser rifles that they carry around all in the cartoon. Snake Eyes has had this. Duke has had this. I'm pretty sure moving forward, all the Joes are going to come included with this, and that's fine. I don't mind at all. The figures, for me at least, when it comes to displaying them, I might end up just displaying Flint. I know even though I had Duke displayed on my shelf with this, probably still going to do the same with Flint anyways. So again, like, it's a really nice representation of the original rifle that they would have had in the cartoon. Pew, 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 pew. I think it would have shot blue. Oh, now I'm questioning my memory of this. Anyways, he does come included with that. And one thing I also really like that he comes included with is the pistol that he also has in the cartoon. I feel, you know what, scratch that. While it's good to include something like this with the figure, I think when it comes to Duke, or when it comes to Flint, I'm going to be displaying him with this. This seems to me like a real Flint thing to have, and he has had this several times in the episodes, so I'm probably going to be displaying the figure with that. Of course, all of that can't be happening until I actually change out the hands. I'll do that more in a moment. But just in case you were curious, if you did want to take, for example, the pistol and not storing in his hand, there is actually a rather large holster here on the side of his belt, and you simply just take the little pistol and you can slide that into the pocket on the side, and there's a place then to store that if, again, you wanted to have the figure displayed with this instead. Pew, 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 pew. Okay, so as for the figure's hands, right now he does have, I did kind of want to start the review the way that the hands look when you get them out of the packaging, but if you did want to have a couple of gripping hands, this hand sort of has more of a trigger firing finger, while this is basically just a gripping hand. So he has a couple of those, of course, for either side. He has one that's a little bit more narrower of a grip, and that's ideal for holding, say, for example, like the flashlight. Just take the flashlight, fit it into his hand. I just dropped the blasted hand. And then he also comes included with, like, for example, I guess maybe this hand probably would be, no, that hand's a little bit too big. That hand probably is better, yeah, for suitable for holding the binoculars. Always ends up happening. Have you noticed that? Always ends up happening. I'm doing the review, and I end up always doing something to drop on the floor. And Black Holes, which right over there right now, has yet to claim it. I better grab that in a moment. And then the last thing the figure also comes included with is a pointing finger, of course, to lead the Joes into battle. Changing out the hands, by the way, is very easy. It's always really easy when it comes to these figures. You just simply take the hand, remove it from the form, then find the hand that you want to use. I'm not going to necessarily use the pointing hand for just yet. I'm going to pop that in place. Take the other hand, do the exact same thing on the other side. We're going to pop that and replace that in. And then again, like if you guys wanted to display the figure with the rifle, for example, you can display it that way. And with the way that the hands are actually bent, you can, let me just pry the fingers a little bit away, you can actually hold the undercarriage of the rifle, and the figure can be displayed that way. Pew, 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 pew. The last of the figure's accessories, pew-pewing aside, is that he comes with some swappable head sculpts. Now, this is the defaulted head. One thing I will say, though, about Flint, as much as I love Flint, I can't be looking at this guy with rose-colored glasses. The thing I like about Flint, from a character standpoint, doesn't change. But I will say, though, just to bring in Duke, I think Duke is a nicer-looking head sculpt. They seemed, I don't know, have changed the plastic. They've given him kind of more of a shinier finished plastic. The original Duke didn't have that. I don't know if it was just the case that they actually painted the faces or they just used a more matte plastic. But very visibly, you can notice that Flint's got more shinier plastic for his face. It's a little jarring, especially when we saw the original images of what this guy was going to look like online. I kind of wish they could have had a little bit better of a head sculpt when it comes to Flint, because again, like, I have such a strong attachment to Flint as a character. I really wish that the head would have delivered as good as maybe what we got with the Duke before. though he does comes with a couple of alternate head sculpts. The first one comes with the headphones, like the little earphone headband. I guess you would say headband. The same thing also came included with Duke as well. Now, the thing about it, though, is, let's just put the figure down here for a second. While I do like this head sculpt, I kind of wish that they could have found the way to have the headband as a separate piece. Because if you did want to have, for example, a Joe like Flint, for example, yelling to his troops, like attack, yo Joe, yo Joe. I mean, obviously, I don't always want to have the figure displayed with the headband on. Like, if only this was something that could be added separately, because I would love to have just been able to display the figure with this expression and not necessarily have attached to it, literally, a headband, like a little earphone piece that you could actually talk to the rest of the Joes with. But there's this head sculpt, and then there's also this one here, which is an unmasked head sculpt. Right away, I'm probably thinking the exact same thing you guys are thinking. Does it not look a little bit like Ben Affleck? Which I was thinking right away, if they were ever to do a G.I. Joe live-action movie, giving it a little bit of course, polish to it, maybe not like the original Joe movies, I would definitely cast Ben Affleck as Flint. I think he would actually fit the boots rather nicely. The thing I like also about this head sculpt is because he also has a headband, because he also has a beret. I just drew a blank as I think of the name of it. He has this as a beret as a separate piece that if you wanted to have the figure displayed without the beret, you can do that, but you can also have the figure displayed with the beret. The caution, of course, will go along with that, because obviously if you're going to be putting it on top of the hair and then removing it, there's always the risk that it could start to flake and chip the paint off the front. But if you did want to have, say, for example, Flint displayed, I mean, really, to look at the heads, I think almost like this head's better anyways than this one we start with. So I might just find myself displaying Flint with this head sculpt, and I always have the option down the road I can remove the beret. Speaking of removing, let's go ahead and remove the head from the ball joint, which is pretty easy to do. And let's just put on what I feel to be the best of the three heads. I would maybe not say that if I had the head that didn't have like the walkie-talkie, the earphone piece attached to it. Just going to put the head onto the ball joint. The thing about the head, though, is I've noticed with the hole inside the head, like it doesn't fit right away when you put the figure onto the ball joint. The first time I did this, and since then, the plastic has cooled a little bit. I ended up having to heat the head in hot water. Probably not best advised. I probably would have just used a hairdryer now looking back on it. But I just heated it just enough on the bottom that I could soften up the plastic. Because I noticed like right away, like the head didn't fit onto the ball joint as easy as I would have hoped. But that's what it looks like. And again, just to show you where we came from. You know, again, like this one's good, but I think this one's just a little bit better. Personal opinion, at least. And the benefit of this, of course, it does have the removable beret. I just don't know if I'm going to be removing it as frequently, though. As for the rest of Flint, he certainly does look like he did from the cartoon. Like a departure, though, from the original toy would have had this all dark black. In the cartoon, he would have had this all in green. And again, like he has all the markers he would have had in the cartoon. It has been printed nicely here on the plastic. He's got the little bandoliers on both the sides, of course, that wrap around. He's got a few little additional shells there. I think he actually had a couple of shells there on the top that you would normally have used for the shotgun. But this is all kind of more of a softer plastic. It seems to be the case that it's separate from the rest of Flint's body. So I guess if you wanted to, not that you would detach this, you can't anyways because the belt's there anyways, but they seem to have done that also not to prevent any articulation problems when it comes to moving this guy around. It's probably one of the reasons why they kept the straps separate and didn't actually glue it anywhere to the figure's body. He does have, again, like the gloves. Those gloves, again, are removable. I just opted to choose these ones for displaying, I guess, the figure with the weapon. And again, like he's got all the color markings that he would have had in the cartoon, right down to the fact he does have the camo printing here, the alternating colors, primarily, of course, of the more military green, but then he's got also little markings there, the camouflage markings of the brown. So he does look quite good like he does in the cartoon. I don't know if his boots, though, are as this light of a color. I have to go back and look at the source material again. These seem, at least to me, like they're too light when you compare them to the rest of the body, but again, I would have to go back and look at the cartoon again. For the figure's articulation, going back to Flint's head again. Now, we're going to rotate it back and forth and show you guys not necessarily the limitations, because actually, like, the heads move pretty good. You can rock them back and forth as well. The only downside, though, is with the head that I now chose, it just means, like, every time I'm moving it, I really kind of want to move it further down, because I just don't want to rub the beret back and forth too much against his head. But the head does look up, it does look down, and, of course, in between that, you can rock it back and forth as well. Just one little thing before we actually move on to the rest of the figure. The only other thing I would say as a criticism to the character is the fact that his neck seems visibly greener. Have you noticed that also as well? He has it also here in the bicep section, so it seems to be the case like these are places where Super 7 would have gone and painted it. Head sculpt would have been only simply sculpted in the flesh skin coloring, but like the neck, the bicep areas, and I guess that's really the only other areas, are clearly visibly darker and very much more got a greenish tint to it. Really wish that that wasn't the case. Now, obviously, they would have used just the green plastic and they would have had to go back and paint the skin tone, but I really honestly feel like it's jarring here and it's certainly jarring here that I really wish they could have gone back with a second coat of paint. The only other criticisms. But as it certainly goes back to the figure's posability, the figure's arms do hinge out at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and rotate them all the way around, and that's the same on both the sides. Figure has a bicep swivel. Figure has a single hinge on the elbow that allows the forearm to rotate back and forth, and of course the hands that I decide to use, those rotate all the way around. Because again, like the straps aren't attached to the top of his body, he has an upper torso crunch, and he also has a waist swivel, not limited at all by the fact he has those strappings. The only thing that is limited, unfortunately, is the way they've actually got the holster. The holster is actually pegged onto the belt, so if you did want to move his legs, for example, you simply just twist the holster around. And then from there, Flint would be able to do a much better split than if the holster was just permanently in place. Legs go forward, and the legs, of course, go back, but they stop abruptly here. They're not going to go any further past his behind. He has a swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure has a single hinge in the knee that allows the lower leg. Actually, the lower legs don't really rotate, but the boots at least do. You can rotate them technically all the way around. You can hinge them up and down on the foot section, and he does have a nice ankle pivot. One last thing I will want to say too as well is that I like that they finished at least the laces off here. When you get too far, obviously you'll notice that the laces stop short, and of course you just got the sculpting of the plastic underneath, but at least as far as here, you still got at least a little bit of mileage where the sculpt still stays there, so glad to see that they included that. All in all, it's a good looking Flint. I will honestly say though, I mean, if you were to compare the Flint to the Wave 1 Duke, I think Duke is a superior looking character, which kind of pains me to say that because I always liked Flint a lot more than Duke. There's something that they've done here that they haven't done as well for Flint. I don't know if it's just the changing of the plastic that they've done, whether it was the case that they went and actually painted Duke's head, where they haven't done it maybe as much for Flint. There's certainly something separating the two looks of the characters. I feel like Flint, in a way, unfortunately, doesn't look as finished as Duke, and again, it only pains me to say that because, again, I love Flint so much that unfortunately, I kind of wish that they could have done something more to Flint just to fix up the face and get it closer, in fact, to what we got with Duke. Because, again, of the two figures, Wave 1 Duke looks so much better when you compare the two on your shelf. While maybe sadly not living up to those high standards that Duke delivered in Wave 1, I think Super 7 gave us still a nice looking Flint, but there are noticeable differences between the second wave and the Wave 1 we got before. Something about Duke. Duke's face was painted. It sort of had a more of a matte finish, and he looked more like the cartoon. Flint, on the other hand, seems to have more noticeably shinier plastic. I don't know if they've actually just not painted Flint's face like they did with Duke before, or if it was just the recipe of the plastic that they're using now, but Flint does look like he's using a different type of plastic. It doesn't necessarily translate to a weaker body. In fact, the construction of the body is exactly the same. The quality of the plastic is still the same, and yet, strangely, Flint has a shiny face, which is unfortunately a thing that's a bit of a detriment to this figure because I really wanted Flint to deliver as good as he looked online. Duke delivered, I thought, just as good as he looked online, but Flint comes up just a little bit short. And unfortunately, though, that trend carries over to at least a couple of the other figures from this particular wave. Lady J, another one I was really excited to get, she also has the shinier face too, which we'll obviously talk about more when we look at her. But I don't know what they've done differently. I just hope, though, that they can correct it with maybe Wave 3 moving forward. What do you guys think of Flint? Let me know down below in the comments section. And have you also noticed there's a little bit of a difference between what we got with Wave 2 than what we got with Wave 1? There's also a problem, too, with the way they've painted the neck. And again, it's not all negative points. Flint from head to toe is still a good-looking figure, but it's very obvious the parts of the skin that they had painted rather than using the plastic. Like the rolled-up sections of his sleeve, the exposed bicep is painted, as well as his neck. So the translation of that is, unfortunately, you get a little more of a greenish tint to the neck and the bicep area, but I am still happy. I mean, still, at the end of the day, I'm happy that we did get finally another wave of Ultimate G.I. Joes, and more importantly, we got Flints. Flint's my favorite, and I'm glad to finally get a fully articulated, larger scale cartoon representation of Flint, even though, again, he comes up just a little bit short when you compare him with Duke. If you guys are interested to get this one for yourself, I did actually find all of Wave 2 over on Entertainment Earth's website. So, again, if you guys are interested and haven't had any chance to find these guys yet, click the link down below in the video description. If you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly want to stay on board for the rest of the reviews, because we are going to be, again, looking at Destro, Lady J, and the original blue-clad, blue-costumed Baroness. Those will all be coming up in upcoming reviews. Make sure, of course, you hit that subscribe button down below. Yes, make sure you turn on the bell notification. But more importantly, make sure you're coming back to this channel on a regular basis. As, of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.